The afternoon sun streamed through the large glass windows of the Grand Plaza Hotel, casting warm patches of light across the polished marble floor. 12-year-old Michael sat quietly in one corner of the spacious lobby, his backpack open beside him, and a math textbook balanced on his knees. He had been dropped off by his uncle 20 minutes earlier, with instructions to wait for his mother, who was attending an important business meeting on the hotel's conference floor. Michael checked his watch again. His mom had told him she would be done by 4, which meant he had at least another hour to wait. He didn't mind, though. The hotel lobby was comfortable and much quieter than the noisy community center where he usually waited after school. Here he could actually focus on his homework without distractions. He turned the page of his textbook, biting his lip as he concentrated on a particularly difficult equation. Math had always been his favorite subject, and he was determined to finish his homework before his mother came down. He wanted to show her how well he was doing in his advanced math class, a special program he had been selected for just last month. After working through several problems, Michael stood up to stretch his legs. The lobby was fairly empty at this hour, with just a few business people passing through, talking on phones or typing on laptops. No one paid any attention to the young boy as he walked over to look at a large painting on the wall. The painting showed a landscape that reminded Michael of the camping trip his family had taken last summer. He smiled at the memory, thinking about how his mom had taught him to identify different types of trees and birds. She always encouraged his curiosity, telling him that learning never stopped, even outside the classroom. Michael's thoughts were interrupted when he noticed a man watching him from behind the reception desk. The man, dressed in a dark suit with a name tag that read Richard Daniels, Day Manager, was frowning in his direction. Michael offered a polite smile, the way his mother had taught him to be respectful to adults, but the man's expression didn't change. Feeling a little uncomfortable under the man's stare, Michael returned to his seat and reopened his textbook. He tried to focus on his homework again, but he could feel the manager's eyes still on him. Maybe he wasn't supposed to be looking at the painting, Michael thought. He decided to stay in his seat until his mother arrived. As the minutes ticked by, Michael noticed the manager speaking to another hotel employee, occasionally glancing in his direction. The conversation seemed intense, with the manager gesturing emphatically. Michael shifted in his seat, suddenly feeling like he was doing something wrong just by being there. Finally, the manager approached him, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Michael looked up, trying to appear confident despite the growing and knot in his stomach. "Excuse me, young man," the manager said, his voice carrying a sharp edge that made Michael sit up straighter. "Are you a guest of this hotel?" "No, sir," Michael answered truthfully. "I'm waiting for my mom. She's in a meeting upstairs." The manager's eyes narrowed. "And who exactly is your mother?" "Dr. Williams," Michael replied, remembering how proud he felt whenever he said his mother's title. "She's here for a business conference. She told me to wait for her in the lobby." The manager crossed his arms, looking down at Michael with obvious skepticism. "We don't allow loitering in this establishment. This is a 5-star hotel, not a public library or a daycare center." Michael felt his cheeks grow warm. "I'm not loitering, sir. I'm just doing my homework while I wait. My mom should be done in about an hour." "I find that hard to believe," Sombies, the manager said, his tone making it clear he didn't think Michael was telling the truth. "What room is your mother staying in?" Michael hesitated. His mother had mentioned her room number earlier, but in his nervousness he couldn't remember it. "I don't know the exact number," he admitted, "but I can call her if you—" "That won't be necessary," the manager cut him off. "Look, kid, we've had problems with people hanging around the hotel who aren't guests. It creates an uncomfortable atmosphere for our paying customers." Michael noticed how the manager's eyes scanned his casual clothes, jeans and a simple blue t-shirt, and the way his mouth curled slightly when he said, "people." He had seen that look before, had heard that tone, and despite his young age, he understood exactly what the manager was implying. "My mom is really here," Michael insisted, his voice smaller now. "She's one of the speakers at the business ethics conference. If you could just let me call her—" "I've heard enough," the manager said, raising a hand to silence him. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Now." Michael stared at the manager in disbelief. "But my mom told me to wait here. I don't have anywhere else to go." "That's not my concern," the manager replied coldly. "Either you leave voluntarily, or I'll have security escort you out." Michael's hands trembled as he began packing his books into his backpack. This wasn't right. He hadn't done anything wrong. He thought about arguing further, about demanding to call his mother. But something in the manager's expression made him hesitate. He had been taught to respect authority figures, but he had also been taught about injustice. "Can I at least wait outside the front entrance?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "So my mom can find me when she's done?" The manager seemed to consider this for a moment. "You can wait on the bench across the street in the park, but not on hotel property. We have an image to maintain." Michael zipped up his backpack and stood, his legs feeling oddly weak. The manager watched him with stern eyes, following a few steps behind as if to ensure he actually left. As they approached the grand revolving doors at the entrance, Michael spotted a security guard watching the interaction with a puzzled expression. "Is there a problem, Mr. Daniels?" the guard asked, looking between the manager and the young boy. "Just showing this young man out," the manager replied. "He's not a guest and has no business being here." The security guard frowned slightly but nodded. Michael could tell the guard was uncomfortable with the situation, but he didn't intervene. As Michael stepped outside into the warm afternoon air, he felt a mix of emotions washing over him: embarrassment, confusion, anger, and a deep sense of unfairness. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, uncertain what to do. His mother wouldn't be looking for him outside. What if she couldn't find him? What if she got worried? With a deep breath, Michael pulled out his phone from his pocket. His mother always made sure he had it for emergencies, and this certainly felt like one. As he dialed her number, he moved to the small park across the street, sitting on a bench that offered a clear view of the hotel entrance. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. His mom was probably still in her meeting. Michael left a message, trying to keep his voice calm as he explained what had happened. Then he sent her a text message too, just to be sure. From his spot on the bench, Michael could see the hotel's impressive facade. The Grand Plaza stood tall and elegant, its revolving doors constantly in motion as people entered and exited. He watched as a family with 2 kids about his age walked in, the doorman greeting them with a smile. No one questioned their right to be there. No one made them feel like they didn't belong. Michael opened his math textbook again, attempting to focus on the problems that had seemed so interesting just 30 minutes ago, but the numbers blurred as tears threatened to form in his eyes. He blinked them back, reminding himself that his mother would come soon. She always fixed things. She always knew what to do. As he waited, more alone than he had felt in a long time, Michael couldn't help but wonder what it was about him that had made the manager so suspicious. Was it his clothes? The color of his skin? The texture of his hair? His mother had talked to him about these things before. Difficult conversations that no parent wanted to have with their child, but necessary ones. Sometimes, she had told him once, people will see you differently. They'll make assumptions that have nothing to do with who you really are. What matters is that you know your own worth. Michael remembered those words now as he sat on the bench watching the grand hotel that had rejected him. He was a good student, he was respectful, he had done nothing wrong. And yet here he was, waiting outside like he was something to be ashamed of. A buzzing sound from his pocket pulled Michael from his thoughts. His phone was ringing. His mother was calling back. As he answered the phone, Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. He wouldn't be alone in this anymore. "Mom," he said, his voice catching slightly. "Something happened. The hotel manager made me leave." As Michael explained the situation, he could hear his mother's breathing change on the other end of the line. He knew that sound. It was the calm before the storm. By the time he finished telling her everything, her voice was steady, controlled, but with an unmistakable edge that told him she was furious. "Stay exactly where you are," she said firmly. "I'm coming down right now." Michael put his phone away, feeling both anxious and comforted. His mother was coming, and when Dr. Williams arrived, everything would change. The hotel manager had no idea what was about to hit him. Dr. Olivia Williams ended the call with her son, her hand gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. The conference room around her suddenly felt too small, too warm. She took a deep breath, trying to process what Michael had just told her. Expelled from the hotel lobby. Treated like an intruder. Humiliated. She had specifically instructed him to wait in the lobby. She had chosen the hotel lobby precisely because she thought it would be safe, comfortable, and appropriate. And now this. The other conference attendees, around her, were gathering their papers, chatting casually as the session ended. Olivia stood still amidst the movement, her mind racing with a storm of emotions, anger, disbelief, and a deep, cutting pain that was all too familiar. "Olivia, everything okay?" asked Thomas Chen, one of the other speakers at the conference. His friendly smile faded as he noticed her expression. "No," she said simply. "My son was just kicked out of the hotel lobby by the manager while waiting for me." Thomas's eyebrows shot up. "What? Why would they do that?" Olivia gave him a look that spoke volumes. Understanding dawned on his face. "I need to go," she said, gathering her presentation materials with quick, precise movements. "My son is waiting outside." "I'll come with you," Thomas offered immediately. He turned to the small group of conference organizers nearby. "There's been an incident with the hotel management and Dr. Williams's son." The conference organizers looked concerned, particularly Eleanor Barnes, the head coordinator who had personally invited Olivia to speak on corporate ethics. "What happened?" Eleanor asked, her brow furrowing. As Olivia briefly explained the situation, more conference attendees gathered around, their expressions changing from curiosity to concern to outrage. "That's completely unacceptable," Eleanor declared. "Let's go sort this out right now." Olivia hadn't expected this show of support, but she was grateful for it. As they moved toward the elevator, she noticed several hotel board members who had attended her talk were also joining the group. Word was spreading quickly. Inside the elevator, Olivia tried to calm herself. She needed to be composed, articulate, and in control. She couldn't afford to lose her temper, no matter how justified her anger might be. She had learned long ago that expressing rage, even when completely warranted, would only feed into stereotypes and potentially make the situation worse. "I was so impressed with your presentation on ethical leadership," said Robert Wilson, one of the hotel board members, breaking the tense silence in the elevator. "Especially the part about how true ethics must permeate every level of an organization, not just exist in mission statements." "Thank you," Olivia replied, the irony of the situation not lost on her. "It seems we're about to see those principles tested in real time." The elevator doors opened to the grand lobby, and Olivia stepped out first, her eyes immediately searching for any sign of Michael outside through the large glass doors. She could see him sitting on a bench across the street, hunched over his textbook, trying to do his homework despite everything. The sight broke her heart and strengthened her resolve in equal measure. "That's your son?" Eleanor asked, following her gaze. "Yes," Olivia confirmed. "He's 12. He's been sitting there doing his math homework since his uncle dropped him off." Apparently that was suspicious enough to warrant expulsion from the premises. As they crossed the lobby, Olivia noticed how heads turned to watch their unusual procession. It wasn't every day that a group of well-dressed conference attendees, including recognizable hotel board members, marched purposefully across the lobby, with such serious expressions. Olivia spotted the reception desk and the man behind it wearing a name tag that read, "Richard Daniels, Day Manager." He was speaking to a guest, his posture rigid and his smile thin. This was the man who had humiliated her son. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the desk after the guest had walked away. Her voice was calm but carried clearly in the now quieting lobby. "I'm Dr. Olivia Williams. I believe you spoke with my son earlier." The manager's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of unease quickly masked by professional detachment. "Dr. Williams? I'm not sure My son," Olivia continued, who was sitting in this lobby doing his homework while waiting for me to finish my keynote address at your hotel's business ethics conference. The son you decided to remove from the premises without allowing him to contact me. Understanding dawned on the manager's face, followed by the first hints of alarm as he noticed the group of people standing behind Olivia, particularly the board members he clearly recognized. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, he began, his tone shifting to something more conciliatory. We have policies about unaccompanied minors. Do those policies include making assumptions about which children belong in your hotel and which don't? Olivia asked, her voice remaining steady. Because my son told me, he explained. He was waiting for me, offered to call me, and was still forced to leave. The manager's eyes darted to the growing audience. Hotel guests had stopped to watch the confrontation. Staff members were pausing in their duties, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Dr. Williams, Eleanor stepped forward, is a distinguished speaker at our conference and an honored guest of this hotel. I'm Eleanor Barnes, head coordinator of the Business Ethics Summit being held here. The manager's face paled slightly. Ms. Barnes, I wasn't aware. That's precisely the problem, isn't it? Olivia interjected. You weren't aware. You didn't bother to verify my son's story. You made assumptions based on what exactly? The challenge hung in the air. Both of them knew what she was asking, but Olivia wanted to hear him say it. It was a security concern, the manager said defensively. We've had incidents of loitering. My son was not loitering, Olivia stated firmly. He was sitting quietly doing his schoolwork. I'd like to know the specific behaviors that triggered your security concerns. The manager shifted uncomfortably. It's not about specific behaviors, it's about protocol. Then show me this protocol, Olivia demanded. Show me where it says that children waiting for their parents should be expelled without verification. I tried to verify, the manager insisted, his voice rising slightly. He couldn't tell me what room you were staying in. Because I'm not staying in a room, Olivia countered. I'm a day guest invited to speak at this conference, and even if my son couldn't remember details in a moment of stress, you prevented him from contacting me. Robert Wilson, the board member, stepped forward. Richard, is this true? Did you prevent the boy from contacting his mother? The manager's composure was cracking. I was following standard procedure for removing loiterers. My son is not a loiterer, Olivia stated, her voice finally betraying a hint of the anger she felt. He is a 12-year-old honor student who was exactly where I told him to be. Eleanor turned to one of the hotel security personnel who had been watching the exchange. Could you please bring up the lobby security footage from the past hour? The security guard nodded and moved quickly to a computer terminal behind the desk. The manager's eyes widened slightly. That won't be necessary, he said quickly. I'm sure we can resolve this without— No, Olivia interrupted. I think it is necessary. I want to see exactly what my son was doing that warranted this treatment. As the security guard pulled up the footage, a small crowd had gathered around the desk. The video clearly showed Michael sitting quietly in the corner of the lobby, focused on his textbook. It showed him getting up briefly to look at a painting, then returning to his seat after noticing the manager watching him. It showed the manager's approach, the conversation, and Michael's reluctant departure. His head bowed as he walked out the grand doors. There was nothing in the boy's behavior that could possibly be construed as problematic. The footage only made the manager's actions look worse. I believe we all see the situation clearly now, Olivia said, her voice quiet but carrying in the silent lobby. My son did nothing wrong, nothing at all. The manager's face had turned an uncomfortable shade of red. Dr. Williams, I apologize for the misunderstanding. If I had known you were a conference speaker— That's the problem right there, Olivia cut in. The fact that I'm a conference speaker shouldn't matter. My son deserved to be treated with basic respect regardless of who I am. What about children whose parents aren't keynote speakers? Do they all get thrown out too? The manager had no response to this. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I would like to speak with the general manager, Olivia said finally. And I would like someone to go out and bring my son back inside immediately. I'll go get him, Thomas offered, already moving toward the doors. The manager looked like he wanted to object but thought better of it. I'll call the general manager right away, he said, reaching for the phone. While they waited, Thomas returned with Michael, who entered the lobby cautiously, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. His mother standing tall and composed at the center of a group of supporters, the manager looking thoroughly uncomfortable behind the desk. Michael approached slowly, unsure of his welcome despite the changed dynamics. Olivia opened her arms and he walked into them, his backpack still slung over one shoulder. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He nodded against her shoulder. "I'm fine, Mom." But Olivia could feel the tension in his small frame, could sense the hurt beneath his brave face. This was not the first time her son had encountered prejudice, but it was perhaps the most blatant, the most public. And it infuriated her that he had to face it alone, without her there to protect him. "Dr. Williams," called a new voice. A tall woman in an impeccable suit was approaching from the direction of the offices. "I'm Patricia Lawrence, the general manager. I just heard about what happened and I want to express my deepest apologies." Olivia gently released Michael but kept a hand on his shoulder. "Ms. Lawrence, I appreciate your apology, but I'm more interested in understanding how this happened and what you plan to do about it." The general manager nodded, her expression grave. "Absolutely. I've just reviewed the security footage myself and I'm appalled by what I saw. This is not how we train our staff to behave, and it certainly doesn't reflect the values of our establishment." "And yet it happened," Olivia pointed out. "In your lobby under your management." "Yes," Patricia acknowledged, "and that's on us. On me, ultimately. I'd like to invite you and your son to my office where we can discuss this more privately, and I can brief you on the immediate actions we'll be taking." Olivia considered this. Part of her wanted to continue the confrontation right here, in public, where the manager's behavior would be exposed to everyone, but she looked down at Michael, saw the discomfort in his eyes at being the center of attention, and decided that moving to a more private setting would be better for him. "All right," she agreed. "But I'd like Eleanor and Robert to join us if that's acceptable." She wanted witnesses, people with influence who could ensure that real consequences would follow. "Of course," Patricia said immediately. As they prepared to move to the office, Olivia noticed the day manager trying to slip away quietly. "Mr. Daniels," she called, stopping him in his tracks. "I believe you owe my son an apology." The manager turned slowly, his expression a mix of embarrassment and resentment. He approached Michael with obvious reluctance. "I apologize for the misunderstanding," he said stiffly, addressing the words more to the space above Michael's head than to the boy himself. Michael looked up at him, his young face showing a maturity beyond his years. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," he said quietly. "You didn't believe me because of how I look." The simple truth spoken in a child's voice hung in the air like an indictment. The manager had no response. "We'll be speaking further about this incident, Richard," the general manager said, her tone making it clear that speaking further was a euphemism for something much more serious. As they walked toward the management offices, Olivia kept her hand on Michael's shoulder, both to support him and to remind herself to stay focused on what mattered most. Not just getting justice for this incident, but helping her son process what had happened in a way that wouldn't damage his spirit. "I'm proud of you," she whispered to him, "for how you handled yourself, for speaking your truth." Michael looked up at her, a small smile finally breaking through his serious expression. "I knew you'd fix it, Mom. You always do." Olivia wished that were true. She wished she could fix everything, shield him from every injustice, fight every battle for him. But she knew she couldn't. The best she could do was teach him to stand tall, to know his worth and to understand that when people treated him unfairly, the failure was theirs, not his. As they entered the general manager's office, Olivia straightened, her shoulders. This wasn't just about one incident or one manager. This was about patterns and policies, about unspoken biases and their real-world impacts. This was about her son, yes, but also about all the other children, who didn't have mothers who could storm in with conference organizers and board members at their backs. The real conversation was just beginning. The general manager's office was spacious and elegantly furnished, with large windows overlooking the city skyline. Patricia Lawrence gestured for everyone to take seats around a polished conference table in one corner of the room. Dr. Olivia Williams sat with her son Michael beside her, while Eleanor Barnes and Robert Wilson took seats across from them. Day manager Richard Daniels stood awkwardly by the door, as if uncertain whether he should stay or go. "Please sit down, Richard," Patricia said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "We need to address the situation thoroughly." Richard took a seat at the far end of the table, his posture stiff and defensive. The tension in the room was palpable. Patricia turned to Olivia and Michael with a genuinely apologetic expression. "First, let me say again how deeply sorry I am for what happened today. It was unacceptable on every level." "Yes, it was," Olivia agreed, her voice calm but firm. "And I'd like to understand exactly why it happened." Patricia nodded. "That's fair. Richard, would you please explain your actions regarding Dr. Williams's son?" All eyes turned to the day manager, who cleared his throat uncomfortably. "As I said, downstairs we have policies about unaccompanied minors in the hotel. It's a security measure." "Could you show us this policy?" Robert Wilson asked, his tone suggesting he was familiar with the hotel's actual policies and doubted this claim. Richard hesitated. "It's more of an unwritten guideline. So not an official policy," Olivia cut in. "Just your personal interpretation of what's appropriate." "It's common sense," Richard insisted, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "We can't have children hanging around without supervision. This is a luxury establishment, not a playground." "My son wasn't running around or causing any disturbance," Olivia pointed out. "He was sitting quietly doing his homework, as the security footage clearly showed." "He couldn't verify that he was connected to a hotel guest," Richard countered. "Told you his mother was at a conference in the hotel?" Eleanor interjected. "A simple call to the conference organizers would have confirmed this." "And he offered to call me," Olivia added. "You prevented him from doing so." "Why?" Richard shifted in his seat. "We deal with all sorts of situations. People come up with stories." "Stories?" Olivia repeated, her eyebrow raising. "You thought my 12-year-old son was making up a story about his mother being at a conference. To what end exactly? What terrible scheme did you think he was plotting while sitting there with his math textbook?" The questions hung in the air. Michael looked down at his hands, uncomfortable with the tension, but also hearing things he needed to hear. His mother defending him. Adults acknowledging the injustice of what had happened. "I think we need to be honest here," Olivia continued, her voice low but intense. "This wasn't about security concerns. This was about prejudice. You saw a young black boy in your lobby and decided he didn't belong there." Richard's face flushed. "That's not fair. I would have asked any unaccompanied child." "Would you?" Olivia challenged. "There were 2 children about my son's age playing on tablets in the lobby yesterday when I arrived. Nobody questioned them or asked them to leave." "That was different," Richard said dismissively. "How?" Olivia pressed. "How exactly was it different?" "Their parents were guests of the hotel," he replied. "And how did you know that? Did you ask them for verification? Did you demand they prove they belonged here?" Richard didn't answer. Patricia Lawrence sighed heavily. "Dr. Williams, you're absolutely right to question this. The inconsistency in how we've apparently been handling these situations is troubling, to say the least." Robert Wilson, the board member, leaned forward. "Richard, I've been on this hotel's board for 15 years. In all that time, we've never had a policy of removing children from the lobby unless they were being disruptive. In fact, we've prided ourselves on being family-friendly despite our luxury status. So I'm very interested to hear when this unwritten guideline of yours came into effect." Richard looked increasingly uncomfortable. "It's just common sense security," he repeated, but his voice had lost its conviction. "Let's be very clear," Olivia said, looking directly at the day manager. "What happened today wasn't about security. It was about bias. Whether conscious or unconscious, you saw my son and made assumptions based on his appearance. You decided he didn't belong in your hotel without any valid reason." Michael, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. You didn't even let me explain properly, he said, his young voice steady despite his obvious nervousness at addressing the adults. You kept interrupting me when I tried to tell you about my mom. All eyes turned to the boy, and Patricia's expression softened. Michael, can you tell us exactly what happened from your perspective? I'd like to hear it directly from you. Michael glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath. I was just sitting there doing my math homework. My uncle dropped me off and told me to wait for Mom in the lobby. I was being quiet. I got up once to look at a painting, but then I saw Mr. Daniels watching me, so I went back to my seat. Michael's voice grew steadier as he continued. Then he came over and asked if I was a guest. I told him I was waiting for my mom, who was at a conference upstairs. He asked for her room number, but I couldn't remember it. When I offered to call her, he said it wasn't necessary and that I had to leave. He said, Michael hesitated. It's okay, Olivia encouraged. You can tell them exactly what he said. But Olivia could feel the tension in his small frame, could sense the hurt beneath his brave face. This was not the first time her son had encountered prejudice, but it was perhaps the most blatant, the most public, and it infuriated her that he had to face it alone without her there to protect him. Dr. Williams called a new voice. A tall woman in an impeccable suit was approaching from the direction of the offices. I'm Patricia Lawrence, the general manager. I just heard about what happened, and I want to express my deepest apologies. Olivia gently released Michael, but kept a hand on his shoulder. Ms. Lawrence, I appreciate your apology, but I'm more interested in understanding how this happened and what you plan to do about it. The general manager nodded, her expression grave. Absolutely. I've just reviewed the security footage myself, and I'm appalled by what I saw. This is not how we train our staff to behave, and it certainly doesn't reflect the values of our establishment. And yet it happened, Olivia pointed out. In your lobby, under your management. Yes, Patricia acknowledged. And that's on us. On me, ultimately. I'd like to invite you and your son to my office where we can discuss this more privately, and I can brief you on the immediate actions we'll be taking. Olivia considered this. Part of her wanted to continue the confrontation right here in public, where the manager's behavior would be exposed to everyone, but she looked down at Michael, saw the discomfort in his eyes at being the center of attention, and decided that moving to a more private setting would be better for him. All right, she agreed. But I'd like Eleanor and Robert to join us. If that's acceptable. She wanted witnesses, people with influence who could ensure that real consequences would follow. Of course, Patricia said immediately. As they prepared to move to the office, Olivia noticed the day manager trying to slip away quietly. Mr. Daniels, she called, stopping him in his tracks. I believe you owe my son an apology. The manager turned slowly, his expression a mix of embarrassment and resentment. He approached Michael with obvious reluctance. I apologize for the misunderstanding, he said stiffly, addressing the words more to the space above Michael's head than to the boy himself. Michael looked up at him, his young face showing a maturity beyond his years. It wasn't a misunderstanding, he said quietly. You didn't believe me because of how I look. The simple truth spoken in a child's voice hung in the air like an indictment. The manager had no response. We'll be speaking further about this incident, Richard, the general manager said, her tone making it clear that speaking further was a euphemism for something much more serious. As they walked toward the management offices, Olivia kept her hand on Michael's shoulder, both to support him and to remind herself to stay focused on what mattered most. Not just getting justice for this incident, but helping her son process what had happened in a way that wouldn't damage his spirit. I'm proud of you, she whispered to him, for how you handled yourself, for speaking your truth. Michael looked up at her, a small smile finally breaking through his serious expression. I knew you'd fix it, Mom. You always do. Olivia wished that were true. She wished she could fix everything, shield him from every injustice, fight every battle for him. But she knew she couldn't. The best she could do was teach him to stand tall, to know his worth, and to understand that when people treated him unfairly, The failure was theirs, not his. As they entered the general manager's office, Olivia straightened, her shoulders. This wasn't just about one incident or one manager. This was about patterns and policies, about unspoken biases and their real-world impacts. This was about her son, yes, but also about all the other children who didn't have mothers who could storm in with conference organizers and board members at their backs. The real conversation was just beginning. The general manager's office was spacious and elegantly furnished with large windows overlooking the city skyline. Patricia Lawrence gestured for everyone to take seats around a polished conference table in one corner of the room. Dr. Olivia Williams sat with her son Michael beside her, while Eleanor Barnes and Robert Wilson took seats across from them. The day manager, Richard Daniels, stood awkwardly by the door, as if uncertain whether he should stay or go. "Please sit down, Richard," Patricia said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "We need to address this situation thoroughly." Richard took a seat at the far end of the table, his posture stiff and defensive. The tension in the room was palpable. Patricia turned to Olivia and Michael with a genuinely apologetic expression. "First, let me say again how deeply sorry I am for what happened today. It was unacceptable on every level." "Yes, it was," Olivia agreed, her voice calm but firm. "And I'd like to understand exactly why it happened." Patricia nodded. "That's fair. Richard, would you please explain your actions regarding Dr. Williams's son?" All eyes turned to the day manager, who cleared his throat uncomfortably. "As I said, downstairs we have policies about unaccompanied minors in the hotel. It's a security measure." "Could you show us this policy?" Robert Wilson asked, his tone suggesting he was familiar with the hotel's actual policies and doubted this claim. Richard hesitated. "It's more of an unwritten guideline." "So not an official policy," Olivia cut in. "Just your personal interpretation of what's appropriate." "It's common sense," Richard insisted, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "We can't have children hanging around without supervision. This is a luxury establishment, not a playground. My son wasn't running around or causing any disturbance," Olivia pointed out. "He was sitting quietly doing his homework, as the security footage clearly showed." "He couldn't verify that he was connected to a hotel guest," Richard countered. "Told you his mother was at a conference in the hotel?" Eleanor interjected. "A simple call to the conference organizers would have confirmed this." "And he offered to call me," Olivia added. "You prevented him from doing so. Why?" Richard shifted in his seat. "We deal with all sorts of situations. People come up with stories." "Stories," Olivia repeated, her eyebrow raising. "You thought my 12-year-old son was making up a story about his mother being at a conference? To what end exactly? What terrible scheme did you think he was plotting while sitting there with his math textbook?" The questions hung in the air. Michael looked down at his hands, uncomfortable with the tension but also hearing things he needed to hear. His mother defending him, adults acknowledging the injustice of what had happened. "I think we need to be honest here," Olivia continued, her voice low but intense. "This wasn't about security concerns. This was about prejudice. You saw a young black boy in your lobby and decided he didn't belong there." Richard's face flushed. "That's not fair. I would have asked any unaccompanied child." "Would you?" Olivia challenged. "There were 2 children about my son's age playing on tablets in the lobby yesterday when I arrived. Nobody questioned them or asked them to leave." "That was different," Richard said dismissively. "How?" Olivia pressed. "How exactly was it different?" "Their parents were guests of the hotel," he replied. "And how did you know that? Did you ask them for verification? Did you demand they prove they belonged here?" Richard didn't answer. Patricia Lawrence sighed heavily. "Dr. Williams, you're absolutely right to question this. The inconsistency in how we've apparently been handling these situations is troubling, to say the least." Robert Wilson, the board member, leaned forward. "Richard, I've been on this hotel's board for 15 years. In all that time, we've never had a policy of removing children from the lobby unless they were being disruptive. In fact, we've prided ourselves on being family-friendly despite our luxury status. So I'm very interested to hear when this unwritten guideline of yours came into effect. Richard looked increasingly uncomfortable. It's just common sense security, he repeated, but his voice had lost its conviction. Let's be very clear, Olivia said, looking directly at the day manager. What happened today wasn't about security. It was about bias. Whether conscious or unconscious, you saw my son and made assumptions based on his appearance. You decided he didn't belong in your hotel without any valid reason. Michael, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. You didn't even let me explain properly, he said, his young voice steady despite his obvious nervousness at addressing the adults. You kept interrupting me when I tried to tell you about my mom. All eyes turned to the boy, and Patricia's expression softened. Michael, can you tell us exactly what happened from your perspective? I'd like to hear it directly from you. Michael glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath. I was just sitting there doing my math homework. My uncle dropped me off and told me to wait for Mom in the lobby. I was being quiet. I got up once to look at a painting, but then I saw Mr. Daniels watching me, so I went back to my seat. Michael's voice grew steadier as he continued. Then he came over and asked if I was a guest. I told him I was waiting for my mom, who was at a conference upstairs. He asked for her room number, but I couldn't remember it. When I offered to call her, he said it wasn't necessary and that I had to leave. He said, Michael hesitated. It's okay, Olivia encouraged. You can tell them. Exactly what he said. Michael nodded. He said they'd had problems with people hanging around who weren't guests. The way he said people made me feel, I don't know, bad. Like I was doing something wrong just by being there. Patricia's expression had grown increasingly grave as Michael spoke. She turned to Richard, whose face was now a mask of discomfort. Is this an accurate account of what happened, Richard? More or less, he admitted reluctantly. But it wasn't about what she's implying. It was about maintaining the hotel's standards. And what standards are those exactly? Robert asked sharply, because they certainly don't align with the values this establishment was founded on. Eleanor, who had been observing quietly, spoke up. You know, Richard, the irony here is almost painful. Dr. Williams was literally giving a keynote address on ethical leadership and unconscious bias when this happened. Her expertise is in helping organizations identify and address exactly the kind of behavior you displayed today. Richard looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. I didn't know who she was. Again, that's precisely the problem, Olivia interjected. You shouldn't need to know who I am for my son to be treated with basic dignity and respect. The fact that I happen to be a professional with some influence shouldn't be what determines whether my child is welcome in your establishment. Patricia nodded in agreement. You're absolutely right, Dr. Williams, and that brings us to what happens next. She turned to Richard with a serious expression. Richard, I'm placing you on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation of this incident. The day manager's eyes widened. Administrative leave over this? That's entirely appropriate, Patricia finished firmly. This kind of behavior is completely at odds with our values and policies. We need to review not just this incident, but your overall conduct and decision-making. Robert nodded his approval. I'll be bringing this matter to the full board's attention. We need to ensure our policies are clear and that all staff are properly trained to avoid similar incidents in the future. Richard looked around the table, seeming to realize for the first time the seriousness of the situation. His professional demeanor finally cracked. This is ridiculous. All I did was try to maintain security in the lobby, and now my job is on the line because I didn't recognize some VIP's kid. The outburst hung in the air for a moment. Then Olivia spoke, her voice quiet but powerful. And there it is, she said, the real issue. You think this is about not recognizing a VIP's kid. It's not. This is about you making judgments based on appearance. This is about you deciding my son didn't belong in your hotel because of how he looked. This is about bias, plain and simple. Michael watched the exchange with wide eyes, taking in every word. This wasn't the first time he'd experienced prejudice, but it was perhaps the first time he'd seen it named so explicitly, confronted so directly. Patricia stood up, her decision clearly made. "Richard, please go to HR immediately and inform them of your administrative leave. I'll be joining you shortly to discuss the details." Richard rose stiffly, his face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. He looked like he wanted to say something more but thought better of it. With a curt nod, he left the room, closing the door, a bit more forcefully than necessary behind him. Once he was gone, Patricia turned back to Olivia and Michael. "I want to apologize again for what you've experienced today. It's completely unacceptable, and I promise you we'll be taking concrete steps to address it." "I appreciate that," Olivia said, "but I'm concerned that this might be symptomatic of deeper issues within your organization. One manager doesn't act this way in isolation." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "You're right to be concerned, which is why I'd like to ask for your help." Olivia raised an eyebrow, surprised by the request. "My help?" "Yes," Patricia confirmed. "Your expertise is in organizational ethics and addressing unconscious bias. We clearly need that expertise here. I'd like to bring you in as a consultant to help us review our policies and training procedures." Robert leaned forward, clearly interested in the idea. "That's an excellent suggestion. Dr. Williams, your insight would be invaluable in helping us ensure nothing like this happens again." Olivia was silent for a moment, considering the offer. She glanced at Michael, who was watching her intently. "What do you think?" she asked him quietly. Michael thought about it seriously, then nodded. "I think you should do it, Mom, so other kids don't have to feel like I did today." Olivia felt a surge of pride at her son's response. Even after experiencing discrimination firsthand, his concern was for others. She turned back to Patricia. "I'd be willing to discuss the possibility," she said, "but I want to be clear. This can't be just a PR move or a way to smooth over what happened. Real change requires a genuine commitment to examining uncomfortable truths about how bias operates in your organization." "I understand," Patricia assured her, "and I'm completely serious about this. What happened today was a wake-up call. We need to do better." Eleanor, who had been listening attentively, spoke up. "If I may suggest, this could be an opportunity to develop a model program. The hospitality industry as a whole has issues with bias. What if we expanded this beyond just this hotel? What if we created a case study that could help other establishments examine their own practices?" The idea seemed to resonate with everyone at the table. Robert nodded enthusiastically. "The board would likely support such an initiative. It aligns with our stated values, and frankly, it's the right thing to do." As the adults discussed possibilities, Michael sat quietly, taking it all in. He was still processing the events of the day, the humiliation of being escorted out, the vindication of seeing his mother confront the injustice, the surprising turn the conversation had taken. It was a lot to absorb. Olivia, ever attuned to her son's needs, noticed his thoughtful expression. "Michael, are you okay with all this? If you'd rather we just went home and put this behind us, that's an option too." Michael considered this for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I think what you're talking about is important. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I just wish it didn't have to happen in the first place. I wish people didn't look at me and see something wrong." The simple honesty of his statement brought a momentary silence to the room. Olivia put her arm around her son's shoulders, feeling the familiar ache of a parent who cannot protect their child from every hurt in the world. "There's nothing wrong with you," she said firmly. "Nothing at all. The problem is with people who can't see past their own preconceptions, and that's what we're trying to change, even if it's one person, one organization at a time." Patricia looked at Michael with genuine regret. "I'm truly sorry for what happened today. No child should ever be made to feel unwelcome or less than, especially not in a place that prides itself on hospitality." "Which brings me to another immediate concern," Robert interjected. "Dr. Williams, you and Michael are our guests for the remainder of your stay in the city. All expenses covered, of course." Olivia started to protest, but Robert held up a hand. "This isn't about compensation or smoothing things over. It's about demonstrating our genuine commitment to making this right. We want you both to experience the real hospitality this hotel was founded on. Eleanor nodded in agreement. Plus, it would give you a chance to observe the operation from a guest's perspective, which could be valuable for the consulting work we've discussed. Olivia looked at Michael, raising an eyebrow in silent question. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. All right, Olivia agreed. We accept your offer, but I want to be clear. The real work is just beginning. What happened today isn't resolved with a free stay, or even with one manager being disciplined. It requires a systematic examination of how bias operates within your organization. Absolutely, Patricia said firmly. And we're committed to that examination. This isn't the end of the conversation, it's the beginning. As they worked out the details of their stay and the potential consulting arrangement, Michael found himself thinking about the strange turn the day had taken. What had started as a humiliating experience was transforming into something unexpected, a chance for real change, a moment of growth not just for him, but potentially for many others. When they finally rose to leave the meeting, Patricia extended her hand first to Olivia, then with equal respect to Michael. Thank you both for your willingness to work with us on this. I know today has been difficult, but I believe something important has begun here. Michael shook her hand solemnly, feeling oddly grown up in that moment. I hope so, he said simply. As they left the office, Olivia kept her arm around her son's shoulders. They walked through the lobby, the same lobby where hours earlier he had been made to feel he didn't belong, with heads held high. Hotel staff watched them pass, word having clearly spread about what had occurred. How are you feeling? Olivia asked quietly, as they waited for the elevator that would take them to their newly assigned suite. Michael considered the question carefully. Weird, he admitted. Kinda sad, but also, I don't know. Like maybe something good can come from something bad. Olivia squeezed his shoulder gently. That's wisdom beyond your years, kiddo. And you're right. Sometimes the hardest moments can lead to the most important changes. The elevator doors opened, and as they stepped inside, Michael looked back at the grand lobby with its marble floors and elegant furnishings. Next time he sat there, it would be as an official guest. But more importantly, perhaps next time another child who looked like him sat there, no one would question their right to be present. It wasn't justice exactly. The hurt of what had happened couldn't be erased, but it was a step towards something better. And for now, that would have to be enough. The news spread through the Grand Plaza Hotel like wildfire. By evening, every staff member had heard about the incident involving the day manager and a conference speaker's son. Whispered conversations paused when Olivia and Michael walked by, only to resume with increased intensity once they were out of earshot. It wasn't often that a day manager was placed on immediate administrative leave, and the reasons behind it had everyone talking. For Michael, the experience was surreal. Just hours ago, he had been sitting outside on a park bench, feeling unwelcome and confused. Now he was being treated like royalty. The hotel staff couldn't do enough for him and his mother, bringing extra towels, offering room service, asking repeatedly if everything was to their satisfaction. It's weird, Michael said as he sat cross-legged on the enormous king-sized bed in their luxury suite. This morning that man acted like I was going to steal something. Now everyone's being super nice. Olivia, who was unpacking the overnight bag that Robert Wilson had arranged to be brought up from her car, paused to look at her son. She recognized the confusion in his voice, the attempt to reconcile such dramatically different treatment in the span of a single day. That's how it often works, she said carefully. People's behavior changes when they realize there might be consequences for treating others poorly. So they're only being nice because they have to be? Michael asked, his young face troubled. By this realization, Olivia sat beside him on the bed. Some of them maybe, but I think many of them are genuinely sorry about what happened and want to make it right. People aren't all good or all bad, honey. Sometimes good people stay silent when they should speak up. Sometimes they need a wake-up call. Michael nodded slowly, processing this. Like when you came downstairs. That was definitely a wake-up call. A small smile crept onto his face as he remembered the scene. "Your lawyer voice is scary, Mom." Olivia laughed, grateful for her son's ability to find humor even in difficult situations. "Good. It's supposed to be." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Olivia opened it to find Patricia Lawrence, the general manager, holding a large folder. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," Patricia said. "But I thought you might want to see this right away." Olivia invited her in, and Patricia laid the folder on the desk near the window. "This is the preliminary report from our security team. It includes all the footage from the lobby cameras during the incident, statements from staff who witnessed what happened, and—" She hesitated, glancing at Michael. "And Richard Daniels's personnel file, including previous complaints." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Previous complaints?" Patricia nodded grimly. "Yes. It seems this wasn't the first time Richard's judgment has been questionable when it comes to certain guests. Nothing quite this blatant, but there's a pattern that should have been addressed long before today." Michael, curious despite himself, had moved closer to listen. Patricia acknowledged him with a respectful nod. "Michael, I want to apologize to you again. What happened today shouldn't have happened, and I'm truly sorry you experienced it in our hotel." Michael nodded, not quite sure how to respond to an adult apologizing to him so sincerely. "We've also compiled some information about our current training programs and policies," Patricia continued, turning back to Olivia. "If you're still willing to consider consulting with us, I thought this might give you a starting point for evaluation." "I appreciate that," Olivia said, picking up the folder. "I'll review everything tonight." Patricia seemed about to say something more when her phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression turned serious. "Mr. Whitaker is here." "The owner?" Olivia asked, recognizing the name from her research before the conference. Patricia nodded. "Yes. He was out of town, but flew back immediately when he heard what happened. He'd like to speak with you both if you're comfortable with that." Olivia glanced at Michael, who shrugged and nodded. "That's fine," she told Patricia. "We can come down to your office." "Actually, he asked if he could come up here," Patricia said. "He thought you might be more comfortable in your own space after everything that's happened today." Olivia was surprised by the consideration. That would be fine then. Patricia sent a quick text, and within minutes there was another knock at the door. The man who entered was not what Olivia had expected. Instead of the slick corporate type she had imagined, James Whitaker was an older gentleman in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple but well-tailored suit and carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing to prove. "Dr. Williams, thank you for agreeing to see me," he said, his voice warm but serious. "And you must be Michael." He extended his hand to the boy as naturally as he had to Olivia, treating him with the same respect. "I understand you had a very unpleasant experience in my hotel today." Michael shook the man's hand, somewhat awed to be meeting the actual owner of the Grand Hotel. "Yes, sir," he replied simply. James Whitaker gestured to the sitting area by the window. "May I?" Olivia nodded, and they all sat down, Olivia and Michael on the small sofa, James and Patricia in the armchairs opposite them. "I want to start by saying how deeply disturbed I am by what occurred today," James began, his gaze steady and sincere. "This hotel was founded by my father in 1962. He built it on a simple principle: every guest deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. That principle was violated today, and for that I am truly sorry." There was something about the old man's directness that resonated with both Olivia and Michael. He wasn't making excuses or trying to minimize what had happened. "Patricia has briefed me on the situation and the actions taken so far," James continued. "Richard Daniels has been suspended pending investigation, but I want to be transparent with you. His employment with the Grand Plaza has been terminated, effective immediately." Olivia raised an eyebrow, surprised by the swift decision. "That was fast." James nodded gravely. "Some situations call for immediate action. I reviewed the security footage myself on the flight back. What I saw was unambiguous discrimination, and that is something I have zero tolerance for in my establishment. Michael, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Will he be okay? Mr. Daniels, I mean." When the adults looked at him in surprise, he added, "I don't like what he did, but I don't want him to, not be able to pay his rent or something." James Whitaker studied the boy with newfound respect. "That's a very compassionate question, young man. Mr. Daniels will receive the standard severance package according to his contract. He won't be destitute. But actions must have consequences, especially when they harm others." Michael nodded, satisfied with this answer. "Your son has a good heart, Dr. Williams," James observed. "Not many people would show concern for someone who treated them poorly." Olivia smiled at Michael with pride. "He takes after his father in that way, always seeing the humanity in everyone, even those who don't extend the same courtesy." James seemed to pick up on something in her tone. "Is Michael's father not in the picture?" "He passed away 3 years ago," Olivia said quietly. "Car accident." "I'm very sorry to hear that," James said, genuine sympathy in his voice. He turned to Michael. "Your father would be very proud of how you handled yourself today. It takes character to maintain your dignity in the face of unfair treatment." Michael blinked rapidly, touched by the comment. "Thank you, sir." James returned his attention to Olivia. "Patricia tells me you might be willing to help us review our training and policies. I want you to know that I fully support this initiative, and am prepared to commit whatever resources are necessary to ensure nothing like this happens again." "I appreciate that," Olivia replied. "But I want to be clear. Real change requires more than just sensitivity training or updated policies. It requires a fundamental examination of the culture that allowed this incident to occur in the first place." "I couldn't agree more," James said, surprising her again. "In fact, I'd like to propose something more comprehensive than what Patricia and I discussed earlier." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "The hospitality industry as a whole has issues with bias and discrimination. What happened to your son today happens in hotels, restaurants, and stores across the country every day. Usually there are no consequences. Usually there's no one with your influence to demand accountability." Olivia nodded, all too aware of this reality. "I'd like to establish a program, funded by the Whitaker Hotel Group, but operating independently, focused on addressing bias in customer service across the hospitality industry, and I'd like you to head it up." The proposal took Olivia by surprise. "That's a significant commitment." "Yes, it is," James agreed, "but necessary. What happened today wasn't just about one manager or even one hotel. It's about patterns that exist throughout our society, patterns that need to be challenged." Patricia, who had been listening quietly, added, "We've actually been discussing something like this at the corporate level for some time, but without the right leadership or real commitment from the top, it never gained traction." Olivia looked at Michael, who was watching the conversation with wide eyes. "What do you think?" she asked him quietly. Michael considered the question seriously. "I think it sounds important," he said finally. "Like bigger than just what happened to me. But would we have to move or something? What about school?" James smiled at the practical question. "The program could be based wherever you are, Dr. Williams. We have properties in most major cities, and much of the work could be done remotely, with occasional travel for training sessions or consultations." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "I'd need to see a formal proposal, of course, and discuss the details with my current employer." "Of course," James agreed immediately. "We can have something drawn up for your review by tomorrow. No pressure to decide quickly. This is an important decision." As they continued discussing the possibilities, Michael found his attention drifting to the window, where the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness. The day had started so normally, school, then waiting for his mom at a fancy hotel. He never could have imagined how it would unfold, or that his experience might lead to something that could help other people. The conversation was interrupted by another knock at the door. Patricia rose to answer it, returning with a young woman in a hotel uniform. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the woman said nervously, "but I wanted to speak with Dr. Williams and her son, if that's all right." James looked at the young woman curiously. "And you are?" Lisa Chen, sir. I work at the front desk. She swallowed hard, clearly intimidated by the presence of the owner but determined to say what she had come to say. I was on duty when the incident happened earlier today. Olivia's interest was immediately piqued. Please come in. Lisa stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I saw what Mr. Daniels was doing, and I knew it. Wasn't right. I should have said something, but I was afraid of losing my job. I have student loans and my mom's medical bills, and she trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. But that's no excuse. I should have helped you. This last part she directed, at Michael, genuine regret in her voice. The room was silent for a moment. Then Michael spoke up. It's okay, it's hard to stand up to bosses and stuff. Lisa shook her head. No, it's not okay. That's why I'm here. I've given my statement to HR about what happened, and I wanted you to know that not everyone here thinks like Mr. Daniels. Most of us were horrified by what he did. James was watching the young woman with an appraising eye. That took courage, Miss Chen. Coming here, admitting you could have done more. Lisa straightened slightly under his gaze. After seeing Dr. Williams stand up for her son, I realized I need to be braver about standing up for what's right even when it's scary. James and Patricia exchanged a meaningful look. Miss Chen, James said, I believe we might have a role for you in the new program we've been discussing with Dr. Williams. Someone who recognizes their own room for growth often has valuable insights to offer others. Lisa looked surprised but intrigued by the suggestion. As the conversation continued, with Lisa sharing her observations of other incidents she had witnessed during her employment, Olivia found herself increasingly convinced that James Whitaker's proposal had real potential. This wasn't just about damage control or public relations. There seemed to be a genuine commitment to addressing the underlying issues. When James, Patricia, and Lisa finally left, promising to return the next day with more detailed proposals, Olivia closed the door behind them and turned to find Michael sprawled on the bed, the day's emotional roller coaster finally catching up with him. Tired? She asked, sitting beside him. He mumbled, his eyes already half closed. Today was crazy. Olivia smoothed his hair back from his forehead, a gesture of affection she had performed countless times since he was a baby. Yes, it was, but you handled it with incredible grace and strength. Michael's eyes opened fully at that. Really? Really, she confirmed. Many adults wouldn't have shown the composure and compassion you did today. I'm so proud of you. Michael was quiet for a moment, thinking, Mom, do you think Dad would be proud too? About how I acted? The question caught Olivia by surprise, a sweet ache spreading through her chest. Oh, honey, he would be beyond proud. You know what he always used to say about moments that test our character. Michael nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. It's not the falling down that defines you, it's the getting back up. Exactly, Olivia said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. And you didn't just get back up today. You helped others see a better way forward. As Michael drifted off to sleep, still in his clothes on top of the hotel bedspread, Olivia moved to the desk by the window. She opened the folder Patricia had left, beginning to review the documents inside. There was much work to be done if real change was to come from today's painful experience. Outside the window, the city continued its evening rhythm, unaware of the small moments of courage and connection that had transpired within the walls of the Grand Plaza Hotel, moments that perhaps would ripple outward in ways no one could yet imagine. 6 months had passed since that fateful day at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Dr. Olivia Williams walked through the revolving doors of the hotel, her son Michael at her side. The familiar marble lobby greeted them, but much had changed since they were last here. Weird to be back, huh? Michael said, glancing around the space that had once been the setting for such an unpleasant experience. Olivia nodded, taking in the subtle but significant changes to the environment. New signage welcomed guests in multiple languages. The staff behind the reception desk represented a diverse cross-section of the community, and there, prominently displayed near the entrance, was a framed mission statement that hadn't been there before, one that explicitly mentioned inclusivity and respect for all guests. "Dr. Williams, Michael!" a warm voice called out to them. Lisa Chen, now the hotel's newly appointed director of guest relations, approached with a bright smile. "It's so good to see you both again." The transformation in Lisa was remarkable. Gone was the nervous, hesitant young woman who had come to their room 6 months ago to apologize for her inaction. In her place stood a confident professional whose new role had been created specifically to ensure all guests received equitable treatment. "Lisa, you look wonderful," Olivia said, accepting the younger woman's hug. "How are things going?" "Busy, but rewarding," Lisa replied. "The new training program has been rolled out to all 15 hotels in the Whitaker Group now, and we're starting to work with independent hotels next month." She turned to Michael with a genuine smile. "And how's 7th grade treating you?" "It's okay," Michael shrugged with the casual nonchalance of a 13-year-old. "Math is still my favorite." "Still planning to be an engineer?" Lisa asked, remembering their conversations during the development phase of the program. Michael nodded. "Yeah, but now I'm thinking maybe something with buildings or spaces, like designing places where everyone feels welcome, you know, Lisa." And Olivia exchanged a meaningful glance, both recognizing how Michael's experience had shaped his thinking about his future. "Mr. Whitaker is waiting for you in the conference room," Lisa said, gesturing toward the elevators. "Everyone's so excited about today." As they rode the elevator to the mezzanine level, Olivia felt a flutter of anticipation. Today marked the official launch of the Hospitality Inclusion Project, the initiative that had grown from the seed of their unfortunate experience 6 months ago. What had started as a proposal for a simple training program had evolved into something much more substantial, a comprehensive approach to addressing bias in the hospitality industry, complete with training modules, assessment tools, and accountability measures. The conference room doors opened to reveal a space transformed for the occasion. Round tables replaced the usual long conference setup, creating a more inclusive environment where everyone could see and engage with each other equally. James Whitaker, still spry and sharp at 74, rose to greet them. "Dr. Williams, Michael," he said warmly, shaking their hands. "Today wouldn't be happening without you both." Michael looked around at the gathered hotel executives, industry representatives, and community leaders with a mixture of awe and shyness. 6 months ago, he had been just a kid doing homework in a hotel lobby. Now he was being acknowledged as a catalyst for industry-wide change. "Please take your seats," James said, gesturing to the 2 places of honor at the main table. "We're about to begin." As they settled in, Olivia noticed Patricia Lawrence, the general manager, directing staff as they made final preparations for the presentation. Patricia caught her eye and gave a thumbs up. Their working relationship had grown from those tense first meetings into a genuine collaboration and friendship. The lights dimmed slightly, and James Whitaker took his place at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this momentous occasion, the official launch of the Hospitality Inclusion Project." His voice carried clearly through the room. "Before we get to the formal presentation, I want to share with you the story that brought us here today." With sensitivity and honesty, James recounted the events of 6 months ago, how a young boy waiting for his mother had been profiled and ejected from the hotel lobby, and how that incident had exposed deeper issues within not just the Grand Plaza, but the hospitality industry as a whole. "We could have treated this as an isolated incident," James said, his voice solemn. "We could have fired one employee and considered the matter closed. Instead, we chose to look deeper, to ask uncomfortable questions about the culture that allowed such an incident to occur. And in doing so, we found an opportunity not just to correct a wrong but to lead meaningful change." As James spoke, Michael fidgeted slightly with his tie, still not comfortable in formal wear despite his mother's assurances that he looked handsome. His mind wandered back to that day, to the feeling of shame and confusion as he was escorted out of the lobby. He remembered sitting on that bench across the street trying to focus on his math homework while fighting back tears. "Michael," James said, pulling him back to the present moment, Would you mind joining me up here? Surprised, Michael looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. He rose and walked to the podium, suddenly very aware of all the eyes on him. "This young man," James said, placing a gentle hand on Michael's shoulder, "showed more dignity and compassion in the face of discrimination than most adults would have. When asked about the employee who had treated him poorly, his first concern was whether the man would be able to pay his rent. That level of empathy, especially from someone who had just experienced injustice, is remarkable." Michael felt his cheeks warm at the praise. "The Hospitality Inclusion Project is built on the understanding that real change requires both accountability and compassion," James continued. "We must hold people accountable for harmful behaviors while also creating pathways for growth and education. And that is exactly what Dr. Williams has helped us design." James gestured for Olivia to join them, and she walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who had found her purpose. For the past 6 months, she had been working tirelessly alongside the Whitaker Group team, drawing on her expertise in organizational ethics to develop a program that went beyond superficial diversity training. "Thank you, James," Olivia said as she took the microphone. "When my son and I came to this hotel 6 months ago, we never imagined that a painful experience would lead to something so transformative. But that's often how change happens. Not through grand plans, but through moments of truth where we decide how to respond to adversity." With practiced ease, Olivia launched into an overview of the Hospitality Inclusion Project. She explained the 3 pillars of the program: comprehensive staff training that addressed both conscious and unconscious bias, structural changes to policies and procedures to ensure equitable treatment of all guests, and ongoing assessment and accountability, measures to track progress and address issues as they arose. "But perhaps the most innovative aspect of this program," Olivia continued, "is the youth ambassador component which Michael helped us develop." Michael straightened up a bit at the mention of his contribution. Over the summer, he had worked with Lisa and a team of education specialists to create a program that would bring local students into participating hotels for behind-the-scenes tours and discussions about hospitality as a career path. The program was specifically designed to reach students from communities that were underrepresented in the industry's management ranks. "We recognize that change doesn't just happen from the top down," Olivia explained. "It also happens when we create new pathways of opportunity and understanding. The Youth Ambassador program helps young people see themselves as future leaders in this industry, while also helping current staff connect with the diverse communities they serve." As Olivia continued her presentation, Michael observed the audience's reactions. Most were engaged and enthusiastic, though a few looked skeptical. Change wasn't easy, especially when it required examining uncomfortable truths about one's own biases and behaviors. But the momentum behind the project was undeniable. After the formal presentation, the event transitioned to a more casual reception. Michael found himself approached by various attendees, many of whom seemed genuinely interested in his perspective. "So, you helped design the Youth Ambassador program?" asked a woman who had introduced herself as the manager of another luxury hotel chain. "What was the most important element, from your perspective?" Michael thought about this seriously before answering. "I think it was making sure the students get to meet people in all different roles at the hotel, not just the front-facing jobs. Like, they need to see that people who look like them can be managers and executives too, not just housekeeping or security." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "That's an excellent point. We tend to focus on the visible diversity, but representation at the decision-making level is crucial." Across the room, Olivia was engaged in conversation with several industry representatives interested in bringing the program to their properties. James Whitaker joined them, adding his perspective on the business benefits they had already begun to see from the initial implementation. "Beyond just avoiding incidents like the one that brought us here," James was saying, "we've seen measurable improvements in guest satisfaction scores and employee retention. It turns out that creating an environment where everyone feels valued is good for business." As the reception continued, Lisa approached Michael with a glass of sparkling cider. "How are you holding up? These events can be exhausting." Michael accepted the drink gratefully. "It's okay. Kind of weird to have adults asking my opinion about stuff," Lisa smiled. Get used to it. Your perspective is valuable, especially on a project like this. They were joined by Patricia Lawrence, who had overseen many of the operational changes at the Grand Plaza over the past 6 months. Michael, I wanted to show you something, Patricia said, pulling out her phone. This came in yesterday. She showed him an email, a message from a family who had recently stayed at the hotel. They described how their 12-year-old daughter, who used a wheelchair, had been treated with exceptional care and respect by the staff from the moment they arrived until their departure. The new accessibility training that came out of the EO project made this possible, Patricia explained. Before, our staff might have been well-intentioned but uninformed about how to best serve guests with disabilities. Now they have the knowledge and confidence to provide truly inclusive service. Michael read the email, a warm feeling spreading through his chest. His own negative experience had led to positive changes for others, a concept that still felt somewhat surreal to him. As the event began to wind down, James Whitaker called for everyone's attention one final time. Before we conclude today's gathering, I have one more announcement to make, he said, his voice carrying across the now quieter room. The Whitaker Hotel Group is establishing a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in hospitality management, with a focus on applicants from underrepresented communities. There was a round of applause at this news, and, James continued, the scholarship will be named the Michael Williams Hospitality Leadership Scholarship, in honor of the young man whose dignity in the face of discrimination inspired us all to do better. Michael froze, overwhelmed by the unexpected announcement. His mother, who had known about this surprise, placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. The first scholarships will be awarded next fall, James explained, and we hope that some of the students who participate in our Youth Ambassador program might eventually become recipients. After the announcement, as people began to depart, Michael found a quiet moment with his mother near the windows overlooking the city. Mom, he said hesitantly. Do you think Dad would be proud of all this? Olivia wrapped an arm around her son, her eyes glistening slightly. Oh, honey. He would be bursting with pride, not just because of the scholarship or the program, but because of how you've handled yourself through all of this. You've shown such maturity and compassion. Michael leaned into his mother's embrace, processing the events of the day, of the past 6 months, really. He thought about the scholarship that would bear his name, helping other kids who might not otherwise have the opportunity to attend college. He thought about the Youth Ambassador program and the students who would participate in it over the coming years. He thought about Lisa Chen, who had found her voice and was now helping others find theirs, and he thought about the day manager, Richard Daniels, whose action had set all of this in motion. Michael had asked about him once, a few months after the incident. His mother had learned through her contacts at the hotel that Daniels had initially been angry about his termination, but had eventually enrolled in a community college course on diversity and inclusion. Whether this was a genuine attempt at growth or simply a move to improve his employment prospects, no one could say for certain, but Michael liked to think it was the former. Ready to head home? Olivia asked, noticing her son's thoughtful expression. Michael nodded, taking one last look around the conference room where so many commitments to change had just been made. Yeah, but we'll be back, right? For the youth ambassador program and stuff? Absolutely, Olivia confirmed. This is just the beginning. As they walked through the hotel lobby toward the exit, Michael noticed something he hadn't seen on their arrival. A new art installation near the reception desk. It was a beautiful mosaic made up of thousands of tiny tiles in various colors and shapes, forming an image of hands of different sizes and shades joined together in a circle. Beneath it was a simple plaque that read, "Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. At the Grand Plaza Hotel, everyone is welcome on the dance floor." Michael smiled at the artwork, appreciating both its message and its beauty. 6 months ago, he had been made to feel like he didn't belong in this space. Today, he was helping to ensure that no one else would ever feel that way again. Outside, the autumn sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city streets. As they waited for their car, Michael spotted the bench across the street where he had sat that day feeling alone and unwelcome. It seemed like a lifetime ago now. "You know what I just realized?" Michael said suddenly. "What's that?" his mother asked. "That man, Mr. Daniels, he actually did me a favor," Michael said, thoughtfully. "If he hadn't kicked me out that day, none of this would have happened. The scholarship, the youth ambassador program, the training, none of it." Olivia considered her son's words. "That's a remarkably generous way to look at it. You're finding the silver lining in a painful situation. Dad always said that the test of a person's character isn't what happens to them, but how they respond to it," Michael replied, echoing his father's wisdom that had been passed down to him. "I guess that goes for hotels too, right?" Olivia smiled, her heart full of pride for the young man her son was becoming. "Right. And for entire industries, if we're lucky." Their car pulled up to the curb, and as they drove away from the Grand Plaza Hotel, Michael looked back at the impressive building where his humiliation had ultimately led to transformation. The incident itself would always be a painful memory, but now it was wrapped in layers of growth, purpose, and positive change. 1 year later, Michael stood at the entrance of the Grand Plaza Hotel, greeting a group of 20 students from his former middle school. As the first official youth ambassador, he felt both nervous and excited about showing them behind the scenes of the luxury hotel. "Welcome to the Grand Plaza," he said with newfound confidence to the wide-eyed 12 and 13-year-olds. "Today you're going to see all the different roles that make this place work, from the kitchens to the executive offices. And who knows, maybe someday one of you will be running a place like this." As he led them through the gleaming lobby where his own story had begun, Michael caught sight of his mother watching proudly from near the reception desk. She was now the full-time director of the Hospitality Inclusion Project, which had expanded to over 50 hotels across the country. The project had recently been featured in a major hospitality industry magazine, highlighting its success in changing both policies and cultures. What had begun as one mother standing up for her son had grown into a movement that was gradually reshaping how hotels viewed and treated all their guests. Lisa Chen joined the tour briefly, explaining her role as director of guest relations and sharing how the Youth Ambassador program had been her favorite part of the project to develop. "Before you leave today," she told the students, "each of you will receive information about internship opportunities for when you're in high school and about the Michael Williams Scholarship for after graduation." One of the students raised her hand. "Who's Michael Williams?" Lisa smiled and gestured to their tour guide. "You're looking at him." The students turned to Michael with new interest, and he felt his cheeks warm slightly. "Why is the scholarship named after you?" another student asked. Michael hesitated, unsure how much of his story to share. "Something happened here that wasn't fair," he said finally. "And instead of just being upset about it, my mom and I worked with the hotel to make sure it wouldn't happen to anyone else. The scholarship was their way of saying thank you. It was a simple explanation for a complex journey, but it seemed to satisfy the students who were already becoming distracted by the sight of room service carts being prepared with elaborate breakfast trays. As Michael continued the tour, showing the students areas of the hotel most guests never saw, he realized how much he had grown in the past 18 months. The boy who had sat outside on that bench, fighting back tears of humiliation, would never have imagined leading a group of peers through the same hotel with such confidence. The last stop on their tour was the new training center on the mezzanine level, where all hotel staff now received comprehensive education on inclusive service. On the wall hung a framed photograph from the launch event, showing Michael, his mother, James Whitaker, and the original team that had developed the program. "And that concludes our behind-the-scenes tour," Michael said as they gathered in the lobby once more. "Any questions?" A girl near the back raised her hand. "Do you think you'll work in a hotel when you grow up?" Michael considered this. "Maybe not directly in a hotel. I'm still interested in engineering and design. But maybe I'll design hotels or other public spaces someday. I think it's important to create places where everyone feels welcome, you know?" As the students thanked him and filed out to their waiting school bus, Olivia approached her son. "That was excellent," she said. "You're a natural." Michael grinned. It was actually kind of fun. They were really interested in the kitchen part. Well, who doesn't love seeing where the chocolate soufflés come from? Olivia laughed. Ready for lunch? James is joining us to discuss expanding the program to the West Coast hotels. As they walked toward the hotel restaurant, Michael paused for a moment to look around the lobby. What had once been a place of exclusion for him was now a space where he moved with comfort and purpose. The painful memory that had once defined this place had been transformed layer by layer into something powerful and positive. He thought about all the children who would come through these doors in the future. Children of all backgrounds, abilities, and appearances. Thanks to the changes that had been implemented, they would be seen, respected, and welcomed. They would never know what it felt like to be told they didn't belong, and that, Michael decided, was the greatest transformation of all.